Welcome everybody to the December Walk Massachusetts network meeting. Thanks for being here, and we'll turn it over to our guest speakers today.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nate Kerr. I am an employee of the Mass Department of Transportation's Office of Transportation Planning. We're very excited to present to Walk Massachusetts Network today the latest updates on the Beyond Mobility Statewide Long Range Transportation Plan. So we will present 4 of the plan's 6 priority areas today. Each priority area will contain problem statements, which inform plan recommendations in the final stage of plan development. We will solicit your feedback on these problem statements through a brief engagement activity on Microsoft Forms, and we'll be popping that into the chat, that link into the chat, so you can access it when needed. So what is the purpose of this plan? The purpose of the long-range plan is to articulate a vision statement that will guide the future of transportation in Massachusetts. It serves as a strategic plan for MassDOT, combining various required plans that focus on bicycle and pedestrian transit, public transportation, freight, pavement and bridges, our state's airports and ports. It also guides the future of capital planning, which covers how we direct our funding to different priorities within finite resources. The last statewide long-range transportation plan, called We Move Massachusetts, was completed in 2014 and helped to define the structure of MassDOT's current capital investment plan, or CIP. A lot has changed since 2014. Beyond Mobility will help set the stage for the next revamp of the capital planning process through a public engagement and strategic planning process, stretching from now into the new year.
The planning process for Beyond Mobility has been divided into 2 phases. The first started in January 2022 and went through March of this year, where during this phase, priority areas, problem statements, values and vision statements were developed through public engagement feedback, data analyses, and a summary of existing plans that MassDOT has previously put together. We're currently in phase 2, where we're looking to document solutions to address problems and achieve a cohesive vision. As part of this work, we're doing outreach like today's meeting in order to ensure the assessment of issues we've put together affecting our transportation network accurately captures the experience of all users. This phase, like Nate just mentioned, it's going to go into a little bit of the new year, and we hope to wrap up the project, I want to say, loosely February, March. So the Beyond Mobility Plan has 6 priority areas: safety, destination connectivity, travel experience, reliability, supporting clean transportation, and resiliency. The final plan document will be structured by these 6 priority areas, which will each have a vision statement, value statements, a set of problem statements, and action items to address identified problems. Equity, both socially and geographically, as well as MassDOT's organizational capacity, are themes that cut across all of these priority areas.
So the first priority area we'll discuss is safety, which refers to the ability of travelers to move through the transportation system free of physical or other harms. The Beyond Mobility vision statement for safety reads, by 2050, Massachusetts will have made significant progress toward advancing a future without transportation-related serious injuries and fatalities, and will have eliminated the disparity in crash rates between environmental justice, also known as EJ, communities, and all other groups. Residents will experience no infrastructure-related safety risks when walking, bicycling, rolling, driving, and riding transit within any community in Massachusetts. So this vision statement was developed from public engagement findings, needs assessments, interviews with key stakeholders, and a synthesis of findings from previous MassDOT plans. The following safety problem statements will inform action items for the plan in its final stage of development. The first problem statement reads, EJ communities are disproportionately burdened by transportation-related injuries and deaths, particularly those involving pedestrians and people on bicycles. Just by way of context, according to MassDOT data, crash clusters in EJ communities or communities that are majority non-white are, I think, about 2 times higher than the rest of the state. So we do see that bared out in the data, the sort of disproportionate impact on EJ communities. The next problem statement reads, traffic fatalities and rates have risen since 2019 despite lower vehicle miles traveled. Following problem statement reads, people bicycling in Massachusetts experience an unsafe and low comfort network, and people in Massachusetts' gateway cities and rural areas often experience safety issues when walking due to poor sidewalk quality and limited sidewalk coverage in these communities. The next problem statement is, residents perceive an unsafe environment on public transit due to a combination of high-profile safety events and more personal incidents. And the last problem statement under the safety category is, there is a need for additional safety-related research and education in a number of other areas, including emerging tech, driver's ed, and the implications of the lack of cellular service in rural areas. Oh, and I guess before we move on to the next priority area, I believe Miranda's popped into the chat the link to the Microsoft forum. I'm just going to quickly pull that up. Thank you all for bearing with me. So if you can navigate to that form and fill out the background information real quick. We're looking for feedback on question 4 around safety. Let's see if we've started to get any answers already.
If you feel more comfortable offering verbal feedback, that's also fine.
Yeah, so of the problem statements and issues that we highlighted in the previous couple of slides, is there anything that you feel like we've missed? Does it seem pretty comprehensive?
I'll say something I know related to Springfield, the high crash rate and the high fatality rate is just is related to a lot of factors, but a big one is that our roadway structure in the community, reflecting it being, a marginalized community, particularly during the 60s, 70s, the last 50 years, has been a roadway structure that was built to get people in and out of the community, of the city, as quickly as possible. So we have an ungodly number of 4-lane arterials through residential neighborhoods. So as a result, we have a huge backlog. 2050 is maybe almost in my lifetime, probably not. But I can't see that in my lifetime enough of those roadways get a road diet and brought down back to being residential streets rather than commuter streets. And I don't know how to make sure that concept, that there's this major level of street redesign that's much more than, quote, complete streets. I mean, it's a whole nother level of just, it is complete streets, but it's at a whole magnitude that the current program and emphasis is just nowhere near adequate. So I need somewhere to be this, and I don't, it'd be interesting to see, how, I don't know how unique, say, Springfield is to Brockton or to Fitchburg or to some of these other communities in terms, or whether our community is just I mean, but now 2 out of the last 3 years, we've had the highest pedestrian fatality rate per our population in the state.
Mm,
So something, drastic has to happen,
mm,
and it's not just MassDOT taking on more intersections, which is what they're doing right now. So anyway, there's my soapbox.
Well, thank you for the feedback. We appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to hear.
I mean, you've got a roadway in the city called Bicentennial Highway, a divide. It's like a 3-mile stretch of a divided highway. You have 2 parallel roadways through only residential residences that you've got Sumner going 2 lanes of a 2-lane road, Sumner going in one direction, and Allen in 2 lanes going the other direction. Doesn't serve those residences. If a friend of those kids lives on the other, there's no crosswalks. And that's one of the other unique features. Every single arterial has no crosswalks across it. Or few and far between. So that's why people are getting killed.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for bringing that up, for raising that issue. So I heard a lot about Worcester and the sort of legacy of, these highway construction and the sort of timeline of 2050. It seems like it's going to be hard to imagine having corrected all of that by 2050.
I said to our DPW chief engineer, why doesn't the city start articulating a goal that every arterial through a residential neighborhood would become only 1 lane in each direction by 2050? And so maybe MassDOT has to push that on us.
That's a very interesting perspective. Thank you, Betsy. Really appreciate it. If there's no other comments on safety.
Nathaniel, it's Tom ready. So I guess I have 2 comments. One is, there's, at least in terms of how the problem statement's written, it seems to focus in on gateway cities and rural areas. Metro areas like Boston still has all of these problems. So that theme, I guess, I just a statement, right? All of these issues here, a problem within the city of Boston, right? Second, the need for additional safety related research and education. So the evolution of curb use, pickup and delivery, TNC use, food pickup, all of those kinds of things, truck delivery, all of those are creating safety hazards as the curb evolves and cities adopt new uses. And there just needs to be some work, I think, to really understand what that means. Particularly cycling, pedestrians, not so much, but cycling, where you've got those conflicts of, I guess I'd call them quick pickup and delivery. And, people pull up, somebody gets in, they pull away, or they're doing, the food work. They're not super attentive. And as those conflicts on streets and roads occur, I mean, clearly somebody on a bike is at risk, right? So you might want to think about research as it relates to that as well. Thank you.
I do know that the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization, Boston MPO, their staff has been doing research on their project's been called Future of the Curb. So they've been doing a lot of research within the region about exactly what you're talking about.
Thanks, Miranda.
So this is Meg Robertson. I think one of the problems I run into with these vision is they don't look at the impact of the practicality of issues. And with the bicyclists, the bike lanes have run into a lot of conflicts with pedestrians on trying to cross the street. So somehow mentioning that it can be designed better and not just putting a bike lane in that will solve everybody's problem. The wayfinding issue for bicyclists and pedestrians is very important. Usually it's looking at bicyclists versus pedestrians on wayfinding, on how to get across the street, find the intersection and or signage that where do I have to go once I cross the street. In addition to somewhere, I don't know if this would go into the safety issue, is when there is modifications to a street, construction or whatnot, on the correct pedestrian channelizing, offering safety, not with yellow tape and cones, and wayfinding in regards to getting around construction sites and or wayfinding for pedestrians around other construction sites or whatnot. And I'm not sure where that fits in. Usually it's not defined, it's safety, but it's not always clear to municipalities what that means, or people who are designing what's the practicality of what we're talking about.
That's interesting. Thanks for mentioning that, Meg. And Brendan, I saw your question in the chat, and I don't think Nate or I have the answer, but I will reach out to our data and GIS team and safety team to get it for you.
Okay, yeah, usually it's based on vehicle miles traveled, but I wasn't sure if that was here, so I think just clarifying that.
Sure.
And then the other question I have is, related to the safety piece is, maybe there's something here about light conditions, because a number of fatal pedestrian crashes and injuries happen in dark conditions, and whether that is it's dark time of day, or there are just not appropriate municipal lights, or the lights are more aimed at the drivers as opposed to pedestrians, and they're just not in the right place when that maybe there is a crosswalk but it's not properly lit. And then connecting that also to your big bucket of emerging technologies, like knowing what kind of lights are on some of these newer vehicles, because both drivers and other road users have some real trouble with some of the newer headlights.
Oh yeah, we've heard that. It's even
yeah.
just personally, it's
exactly
quite intense.
Like so yeah, the two different light related pieces that I don't know could be.
Yeah, I do think I don't know if this isn't our presentation for today, but I believe somewhere in the plan we've identified just vehicle manufacturing, and what is MassDOT's role in that.
Right.
One other thing I would add, this is Meg Robertson, about this lighting, which Brendan brought up, is, and this is somewhat related to lighting, I think, but the confusion, and I didn't see this in here, but it could be somewhere, that the confusion of drivers in regards to the more complex intersections, that you're looking at 5 different things. Which lane am I supposed to be in? Which lane turns right? Which lane turns left? Do I go straight? The wayfinding possibly and safety for drivers on the confusion of the more complex intersections, because I'm not paying attention to pedestrians. I'm paying attention to where the cars are going to hit me if I'm not sure where I am in an unfamiliar area. And I think that's important, because a lot of the intersections are built for cars, but they don't look at it. Is confusing for a lot of people at these major big arterials on which lane I'm supposed to be in, and where am I supposed to be avoiding and looking.
I think that, Meg, that also gets back to the piece they have here about driver's education. Like, I know probably when all of us took the driver's test, like bus lane, red paint wasn't a thing, green paint for bike lanes wasn't a thing. So like there's all sorts of different, not to mention, different types of roundabouts and other infrastructure changes.
All right, well, thank you guys for that feedback. I'm going to just keep us moving on to the next priority area. Miranda, did you want to take destination connectivity?
Yes, you're still sharing the Microsoft.
Oh, wait, really?
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm sorry, guys.
It's the
Okay.
holiday party in the office too, so Nate's got a lot going on today.
Yeah.
So
Um,
a question on the Microsoft is I answered some of it, but it went on beyond with what we were just talking about. So I guess I would ask you, put it at the end where we have time to answer it versus
Yeah.
now, because I keep losing the screen.
Mhm.
when I'm-
Yeah, we've been using another tool previously, and time-wise, we didn't think it would work today. So I think we'll just do verbal for the rest of the presentation, and then
Okay.
you all can use the form post-presentation for anything
Okay,
we didn't have time to
Thank
talk
you.
about.
Thank you.
Perfect. There you go, Nate. And then can you go?
alrighty.
Awesome. Yeah. Alrighty. So our next priority area is destination connectivity, which refers to the degree to which travelers of any mode can access opportunities in the places they need or want to go. And our vision statement reads that by 2050, due to targeted investments that have expanded access to everyday destinations for transit critical and traditionally underserved communities statewide, there will be significantly more modal options, more equitable travel time, increased transportation choices, and far fewer first and last mile gaps for these communities. And we have a handful of problem statements here. So the first one reads, people in environmental justice communities are burdened by connectivity inequities across the transportation system, limiting their access to opportunities. Some of the data for this we have, and I'm sure some of you have heard this before, is that in Greater Boston, Black commuters experience longer travel times via every reported mode as compared to white commuters, and the disparity has continued to grow larger in recent years. Our second problem statement, the lack of contiguous, safe, high comfort bike or pedestrian pathways connecting existing bike facilities limits the ability of people cycling to access key destinations. A data point we have for this is that 97.5% of MassDOT owned roads and 97.4% of locally owned roads where cycling is allowed lack designated cycling facilities. Our third problem statement reads that residents outside of inner core areas, particularly those in rural areas, lack convenient transit services and other non-vehicular transportation options, and feel disconnected from cultural, economic, and other opportunities. Our fourth problem statement, though reduced car travel supports decarbonization, people traveling throughout the state find it difficult to get around using other modes, including transit. And lastly, existing land use patterns reinforce car travel and exclude lower income people from having sufficient modal choices. We'll just keep this screen up and then can just have a conversation. I see Megan and Betsy's hands up.
I think you're both
Both of
on
you are
mute.
muted.
Something that's been in the press a lot lately is the fact that one of the things moving forward that's really impeding destination connectivity is the lack of EV charging equipment. I mean, the fact that you can't even go the length, you can't even go on the Mass Turnpike anymore and charge your car on the turnpike without getting off the turnpike. I mean, and as someone who's had an EV for the last 6 years, when you used to at least be able to, whenever you could actually find a charger, something was available. Now, because there's so many people more with EVs, the available infrastructure is now basically non-existent, because so many more people are needing to use them. And like somebody in yesterday's newspaper in the Boston Globe wrote from Conway, Mass, the hill town. Yeah, how do you expect me to have have an EV? There's, you're nothing near me. Well, you have to have it in your own backyard, but that doesn't allow you to go anywhere. Anyway, so I think there might be part of destination connectivity is this change in automobile type, especially related to the decarbonization.
Definitely.
Certainly. Yeah, and we talk a little bit about that in the resiliency
Okay.
slide, which will come in at the end. But it's a well-made point, and it's kind of, these priority areas do sort of dovetail in these ways. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I'd also just say bicycle. We just need more and more shared use path bicycle facilities rather than paint on the roadway.
This is Meg. With one thing I ran into when teaching blind people intersections is they could get to the intersection, but the intersection itself was not accessible to them, either by too loud a traffic, couldn't understand what was going on in the intersection, it was too complex, very, very frustrating. And so not just the pathways, but also looking at the intersections on that they're not super complex in regards. So you can get to a certain point, but it's very difficult to cross a street to get to the point that you want to get to. That may change a little bit with the new public right-of-ways and the accessible pedestrian signals. But what's there now is somewhat very complex for a lot of people to cross in regards to either older adults or people with vision impairment. The other thing which I would throw in, which I don't know where this goes, is talking about bike transportation, is having adequate storage of your bike when you go to a store. Where do I park my bike? There isn't enough of that if I want to go up to the grocery store and pick up something, most grocery store or strip malls don't have bike storage that I know about. I could be wrong. In certain communities, maybe that's true, but in most communities, that's not true. So if you're biking somewhere, you got to figure out where it's safe to, especially with electric bikes, where it is safe to park your bike, to go in and get something and then come back and hopefully your bike is still there. So I think that has to be somewhere included in the connectivity in regards to, I can bike there, but I don't have anywhere to store my bike that's safe for me to go in and do an errand and then come back out.
Thanks for that, Meg. Do you have anything else anyone want to add? You can also feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, looks like we will go ahead and move on to the next priority area.
Alrighty, so our next priority area is reliability, which refers to the consistency of transportation network conditions. The Beyond Mobility vision statement for reliability reads, by 2050, people traveling by any mode or for any trip purpose in the Commonwealth will be able to expect consistent travel times any time of the day. This is a particularly lofty one, in my opinion, but a great one to see. So we have 4 problem statements under reliability. The first one is, travelers by any mode are highly vulnerable to reliability issues, resulting in lower access to everyday needs. So just by way of context, people traveling en masse must consistently plan for 2.5 times longer than free flow travel times, and must be prepared for the possibility of their commute taking up to 8 times longer than free flow conditions during most vital daily travel times. The next problem statement is, MassDOT's roadway and transit networks do not optimize travel during off-peak periods and must adapt to changing congestion patterns. So again, by way of context, we've seen significant variation in vehicular travel post-COVID on most major thoroughfares, including I-93, 95, and I-90. The greatest variation in vehicular travel time is between morning peak travel times on Mondays and Tuesdays and afternoon peak travel times on Fridays versus other weekdays. The third problem statement is, roadway congestion diminishes transit reliability, limiting the competitiveness of sustainable transportation options. And finally, the last problem statement reads, supply chains are disrupted when freight travel is unreliable. So I'll leave this slide up here for us to sort of have another
Look,
popcorn
explain
style
the
discussion.
Can you explain the last one?
Sure. So with these reliability issues that we've seen, including increased congestion, that has been really disruptive to our freight network. And that we saw in the early days of COVID, but also in this sort of recovery period that we've hit. So some of the worst top 100 bottlenecks are, 2 of them are within Massachusetts. And, you know, we were very reliant on the Conley terminal here in Boston for a lot of our shipping and port needs, but traffic from the seaport and other areas poses a challenge to sort of a free flow of freight moving in between these sort of key destinations. So like when we have these network issues that affect the reliability of freight, that affects supply chains, that has knock-on effects both to consumers, but also to other producers who may be relying on freight deliveries for, you know, unfinished goods that their business then finishes, or other sort of needed inputs for their business processes. So it has these sort of knock-on effects, if that makes sense. Sorry if that was a long-winded explanation.
I mean, I think also the issue is the shared rail lines with commuter and Amtrak and freight. There's not enough rail lines. And usually freight overrides commuter and Amtrak, which is a problem for reliability for those two versus the freight. So that is something. I mean, I would even add to supply chains, but it's also a reliability for the other train systems that use that rail system. And that maybe we need better rail.
It is the limiting factor. It is what it is the limiting factor right now in expanding east-west rail. Because they need more pull-offs between Pittsfield and Springfield and Worcester in order to run both the freight and the passenger.
Great. Any other thoughts on reliability from the group? Seeing none. So I'm going to move us right along.
All right. So our last priority area that we'll discuss today is resiliency. And this refers to the ability of the transportation network to anticipate, prepare for, and withstand the ongoing impacts of climate change. And our vision statement reads that by 2050, significant investments to mitigate against climate threats have protected transportation assets against natural hazards and climate change impacts. A lot of us is probably top of mind after the recent rain on Monday. We have 2 problem statements here today. The first reads, significant transportation infrastructure in Massachusetts is potentially exposed to natural hazards, including sea level rise and storm surge, riverine and coastal flooding, extreme heat, and others. Just so for some context on that, more than 96 miles of roadway in Massachusetts is within 2 feet of sea level rise. More than 850 miles are within 5 feet, and more than 2,100 miles are within 10 feet. And some recent research into impacts of storm on the MBTA system found that as soon as 2030, a 100-year storm would completely inundate the blue line and large portions of the red and orange lines. And our second resiliency problem statement reads that a significant share of the Massachusetts population lives in areas at high risk of natural hazards. Some data for that: Boston, Quincy, Revere, and Cambridge are 4 of the top 20 U.S. cities with affordable housing units vulnerable to coastal flooding based on sea level rise projections. And compared to other states, Massachusetts has the 3rd highest number of affordable housing units exposed to coastal flooding, with a total of 1,530 units.
So this is Meg. I don't know if this would go in there, but also the infrastructure, the updating and repair of bridge and roads on a consistent basis I don't know if there's another section for that on if like what happened in Providence.
Mhm. Just state of
That
good repair for
this, yeah, and the bridges for the Cape and whatnot.
Yes.
And our bridges, there was a study done a while ago in regards to what bridges are at risk. So I don't know if, I mean, that to me would be somewhat important to add to this, even though you're talking more about climate change, but that is a big issue on repairing and maintaining the current infrastructure that we have to keep it in good repair.
Definitely. I do know we call it out. I can't remember where exactly in the plan, but definitely making note of it, especially, with all the recent examples we have of what happens when we don't keep our infrastructure up to date. And I know especially this administration's priority is those Cape bridges. Just recently were awarded some funding, I believe. Brendan?
I know it can be controversial for one department of the state to talk about a different department, but like DCR, like their parkways, like I feel more and more like those parkways need to be thought of. They are roads alongside parks or through parks. So a lot of those are the roadways that are flooding or that will be flooding in the coming years. So like thinking about how those parks like are becoming areas that can flood and like take on this water instead of trying to build up giant barriers against them and like living with water. And like not necessarily rebuilding multiple lane highways through all these parks and instead kind of rethinking what those roadways look like.
Like using those parks as like flood mitigation?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll also add, you say transportation infrastructure. There's another infrastructure that, though, could have a lot of impact on the transportation infrastructure, and that's our dams. We have a lot of very poorly maintained, vulnerable dams. And when we've just talked about, we talked about coastal flooding, but the poor condition of many of these dams is going to greatly impact transportation infrastructure throughout the rest away from the coast. And so just sort of to look at, as sort of along the lines of look at how bridges and these other things are being maintained goes to the resiliency. The condition of the dams goes to the resiliency.
Does the transportation infrastructure, the definition of that, does that includes walkways, sidewalks, streets, bridges, transit? Is there a definition that includes that information? Bike trails? What is transportation infrastructure, I guess? Is there a definition that also includes those pedestrian aspects and bicycle lanes or trails or walking trails, shared use trails? Because you look at different bike shared use trails around, they're not always maintained the same way as or repaired the same way as roads are after a bad winter or whatnot.
I don't know if we actually ever lay out a definition of transportation infrastructure in the plan. So I'm going to make a note that we should. And
because I think a majority of people think
just roads,
just
bridges.
the roads and the bridges and maybe rail, but they're not thinking about the other issues that, again, maintenance, sidewalk damage. You may have had an accessible route, but it's damaged now, and now it's no longer accessible, and it takes forever to get a sidewalk repaired.
Yep.
Or a bike trail repaired.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us working on this project include that in our own head, but it's definitely important to just state out and make sure that folks know that this is the definition MassDOT is working with. So thanks for that, Meg. Any other last minute thoughts? And like we said, we have that form. You can feel free to use that post meeting to submit any more feedback. You want to take some more time, especially with the priority areas we didn't have time for today, because those are all included on that form. But yeah, I think the next couple slides are just some follow-up information to keep up with the plan. We have an online hub that has where we put all of our updates, and then this is the project team email that's monitored if you want to send any direct feedback there. I guess I'll also just share a sort of timeline. I don't know, we don't have like a rough end goal. We need every part of both the MassDOT administration and the state administration take a look at what we're writing down, but we will be having a formal public comment period. And as part of that, we will be reaching out to all the groups we presented to let you all know this has just been released. Like, please go take a look. I do know that a couple of the groups we've presented to have let us know that they're going to, coordinate on sending us feedback as, multiple groups. But yeah, we're happy to conduct another meeting if there's, more questions once that public comment period has opened, any clarification needed. But we're definitely looking for all of the public comments that we can get once that's open. Yep, Betsy.
Is there going to be anything at the end of the plan that then it all gives any inkling of what next? So the public has a sense that this isn't just another plan on the shelf?
Right. I do believe we haven't been given the okay to share all of the action items because they're all still in draft form, but that is where we are at right now. We've been putting together all of these problem statements we presented today have action items directly correlated to them, and identify, what can MassDOT do either itself or through its partner agencies or the T, et cetera, to address a lot of these problems. And part of the plan will be what's next. And I do believe we're going to be doing some like public meetings as well. And I'll make sure that our team knows we need to make it. I know folks have had a hard time moving past the abstract with such a forward-thinking plan. It's not project specific. It's not time.
I mean, are any dollar estimates being attached to anything?
With this plan, no, because this is sort of long range, 25-year time horizon plan. But the priority areas that are set here are going to be translated into our capital planning process. So as we retool the capital planning process in relation to bring it in alignment with this long range plan, that's where you're really going to start to see the dollar amounts come out in the CIPs and the local TIPs and E-STEP, right? And that's kind of how these priority areas are going to be translated into more concrete action with dollars and cents attached to it in the capital planning process. But that is still making its way through through DOT in terms of aligning our goals and whatnot.
But will that, by the time you're at the end of the planning, will that be part of what is articulated?
I believe so, yeah, because the CIP process is directly related to the statewide long-range transportation plan and the priorities established therein.
And the plan's also just, setting the priorities and commitments that MassDOT generally, not just within capital planning, but within all of our other work through our highway division, our environmental, the T, et cetera. We're turning back to this plan to say, these are the goals we've outlined. This is what we're saying we're going to do. And we will be. Is this program aligned with that? Yes, no. Are we going to move forward with it? If it's not, then probably not.
And is part of this process a getting feedback and presentation to at least the Joint Legislative Transportation Committee at the legislature. I know you're, quote, not allowed to lobby, but have it be within the context of the education about the plan would be a way to lobby. To have, I would give the sooner you can get the members of the Joint Transportation Committee of the legislature involved with this, the better.
Sure. I'll have to say that I think engaging with the legislature is a bit above Nate and I's pay grade. But I will pass it on. But it's definitely important. It's we're not just operating in a silo as MassDOT. The legislature plays an important role in making sure that we can utilize all funding available for transportation work.
Yeah, in passing or not passing supplemental budgets.
Well, a big thing, say, on the food security area is legislators, a handful of legislators saw that they really needed to set up a food security caucus. And it's now the second to the Democratic caucus. It's the largest caucus of state legislators. And the difference in terms of money and new legislation that is happening because of it, it's quite impressive. So the sooner we could get, the transportation committee or some people saying, hey, we need a transportation caucus who will push through this plan. I mean, I know some of that is some of our responsibility to try to get to them and say, you need to do this. But the more we could link you doing this planning process with something that is forward looking in terms of implementation would make it a game changer. And it looks like Christian has got his hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
sure.
Go for it, please.
Hey, thanks. And I apologize. I was late because I was busy covering the new electric bikes in the Blue Bike system, which is very exciting. But so I apologize if you covered this earlier. But from what I've read about this plan so far, it sort of treats climate change as something that's going to affect MassDOT, but it's not really what I've seen of the materials posted online. It doesn't really look at the fact that MassDOT is a huge driver of climate change. And the highways are the biggest source of pollution in the Commonwealth at this point. And when the Boston MPO did their long-range planning process last year, they actually modeled the climate impacts of their projects. And according to their model anyway, the transportation sector is going to blow through the entire state's allowances of carbon dioxide emissions in the year 2050 by a factor of 2 or 3. So basically, the current plan says that that we're going to violate the state's Global Warming Solutions Act, and that the current universe of projects we're looking at is not going to meet the state's goals. So how, I'm wondering, what's this plan's process for looking at the pipeline of projects and actually meeting the state's commitments to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and becoming net zero by 2050?
So I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we can definitely take that back to the project managers and other folks who've been more involved on a granular level on this plan and try to get an answer back for you, Christian. So your question is sort of how are we quantifying the effects of MassDOT projects in sort of meeting the state's climate goals? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And the Boston MPO model this for when they were doing the regional at the MPO level. And my understanding is that the long range transportation plan will do that same sort of exercise on the statewide level. So, if the model,
we call it out, at least within our draft documents right now internally, of we've been given this charge because we know that transportation is the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the state, and just nationally and globally. And so how are we contending with that? But yeah, we will get you a more detailed answer for sure. I think we have your email, but you can feel free to send it in the chat as well.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like we said, we have this GIS Hub website where you can keep up with plan updates. And like we said, we'll be following up once the public comment period opens up for the plan. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us. We know another plan effort is kind of exhausting, but we appreciate all the feedback. And you can feel free to use that form as well throughout. Yeah, I think for like the next week or so, we'll keep it open.
Great. Thank you both for presenting to everyone today. And just wanted to make a note in the chat. Abby said that she was able to enter her responses through the form. So just want to make sure you were able to see those as well. So
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
all right. Well, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of the year. We do have events scheduled for already the first 3 months of 2024. So definitely check those out. We hope to see you at a future event. All right. Thanks, everybody.